What's going on, folks? It is Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X-Lair to provide you my super deep and insightful reaction to the latest episode of Legion. Legion Season 2, Episode 2 aired tonight. And, I'm a little bit excited about it. It's just a little bit exciting. There's a lot to kind of unpack here, and really not much at all. One thing that I need to mention right off the bat, which is fucking nuts, was the mention of the Shi'ar. There was a mention by Carrie, I believe his name is, the guy that has the girl living within him, that the orb that took that took David at the end of season 1, and for now, it is completely unclear what the nature of the orb was and why he was taken, even though it was implied that it was Sydney from the future that did it. But again, I'll talk about all of that in a bit. But nonetheless, Carrie mentioned that the orb was advanced, but was not Shi'ar. 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 S-H-I'-A-R. Shi'ar. You can't see him, but Gladiator over here is the head of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, who is a really big component of X-Men canon that has never been explored in the films, even though there are rumors that in the X-Men Dark Phoenix saga we're going to get the Shi'ar finally, and we're going to get Lilandra and all this stuff. I don't believe it, and even if they do it, I don't believe that they'll do it right. I don't believe they'll do it justice. I believe that they'll do a bad job of it. I'm sorry. Simon Kingberg, executive producer of everything, writer of some good things and a lot of terrible things, director for the first time of a movie, X-Men Dark Phoenix is that movie. I don't trust the guy. I don't trust that he's going to do something that's going to honor the legacy of X-Men, that's going to honor the actual Dark Phoenix story, because he wrote X-Men 3. He wrote The Last Stand, and he failed there. So I'm just gonna put that aside for a second and focus back on the show. Was the mention of the Shi'ar foreshadowing of some sort? That maybe we are going to get a Shi'ar element within the show? And if they are going to go there, which I would be okay with them going there, they better do a good fucking job. I don't want some cheap fucking shit. I mean, let's be real. So far, the show has delivered quality. This episode was fucking quality. The creative forces behind the show clearly care about every aspect of the show, but all of that can fall apart at any moment. We know that excellent showrunners can leave shows because of creative differences, and that could be the end of something special, and that could ultimately wind up leading to crap. So, at any point that could happen. I hope it doesn't. I hope this continues on the way it should, and if Noah Hawley and crew and family and Legion creative family are able to somehow tell a Shi'ar related story within the show, I know that they will do it justice. I know that they will create the sort of visual design of the Shi'ar world as we know it from the comics, translated to the filmic medium. In this case, obviously a television show, but nonetheless, it is filmmaking that is just being made to be distributed on television in a longer format. I believe that the translation will be something special and unique, and I'm willing to go along for that ride. I trust that these people, the people behind Legion, can do the Shi'ar justice. Now, will that happen? Maybe not. Maybe that was just an Easter egg for us, but I don't feel like the show is about just dropping Easter eggs. I feel like it's more about laying foundations, planting seeds that eventually will grow, because I'm sure they have plans for several seasons, and they cannot, they could continue the Shadow King story for a really long time, but at some point, like, you got to be able to take the Shadow King down. But nonetheless, I am willing to accept that there are ways to continue telling the story about the Shadow King as the main threat, as I mentioned last week, is because that sort of the defining backbone to this show, and the fact that it's carried into season 2 and that the threat is growing. It implies that is possible. It's possible to keep having that threat grow. And if you have the right ideas to drive you forward in this backboned narrative that will always kind of focus on the Shadow King to some extent, then I'm all in, because clearly, like, having that be the focus of the show is going to lead to good results. I mean, this was a fucking great episode. I love the first episode. I love the first season. I love everything that's happening here. I can't believe it. I get goosebumps watching it at least 4 or 5 times throughout. And it's just so exciting. And I'm so happy that we get to experience it. And every moment that I'm watching, I'm just like in the back of my mind, like, I can't believe I'm actually watching this. Is this real? Like, I'm not just questioning the reality within the show. I'm questioning the reality that I exist in. Like, am I actually watching this show? Like, is this actually happening? Or am I going to wake up one of these days and it's like, I'm back in the world where I just get cheap CW shit with like really bad special effects and like really no attempt to have sort of an artistic signature to the storytelling, but more just like, let's just crank out stories because we got to make 23 episodes of like 5 different shows, you know, except for Black Lightning. Black Lightning is something special, and The Flash is pretty good. Anyway, I'm not going to get sidetracked on that, but nonetheless, the quality overall in the CW, nowhere near the quality that we're getting with Legion. Anyway, so folks, what the fuck is going on in this show, man? Clearly the delusion, this concept of a delusion and the way it was sort of presented last time is still playing out here. There was a comment made in the video last week about David thinking that David seeing Sydney is the delusion, that he has deluded himself to believe that Sydney from the future is communicating with him. Perhaps that is the case. But it's possible, given that, so today when he wanted to communicate with Al Farouk, and he goes into that room and he folds his legs, and then he like winds up in that grassy field again, and then he winds up actually meeting Al Farouk. Like, you saw that trail of slime going into the room, which implied that the delusion is continuing to drive him. And the delusion, if indeed it is him seeing Sydney and her communicating to him from the future, telling him to help Al Farouk, then that is consistent with what we saw. But we also had that moment in that sensory deprivation tank thing where David was able to get outside of space-time. This sort of weird space between moments, outside of timelines, where the future, the present, and the past all existed once. And in there, he saw Sid again, right? And then the story that she told expanded there, right? Like, we were told that Al Farouk is not the threat. Like, there's a bigger threat. So there was mention of a plague by him later, but like, that's not the way she sort of described it. She described it as though it's some sort of sentient threat that wipes everybody out. What could that be? Could it be Apocalypse? Could it be Onslaught? Could it be Proteus? I was thinking Proteus. I don't know. But in the end, it's like, is that all part of his delusion? I don't know. We don't know. Because really, like, to throw in like a time travel element, I guess would be consistent with what happened in Days of Future Past. in the film where Kitty, well, actually no, in the film it was Wolverine's mind that was sent back in time. Anyway, that obviously there's a precedent there, and so maybe, but it is, I think, I don't know. I mean, I'm willing to go along with anything that they're interested in doing in the show as long as they sell it, and they are. They're selling everything so far to me. I'm still unsure. I'm still unsure about exactly what the delusion is and exactly whether or not, like, the Shadow King is still controlling David, or if it is actually Sydney from the future. And I don't know, because, like, okay, so we had that sort of poetic moment in the show that sort of continued from last time, and this time it was the narrator talking about the nature of reality and how humans create our reality with our ideas, and how if we're given the wrong idea, then that becomes our reality, and that can ultimately lead to bad results. Like when Oliver told the kid that green is red and red is green, and green means go, and therefore he crossed the crosswalk when it was red, and he died, apparently, or maybe was hit by a car, whatever, we didn't see it. But nonetheless, that implied that like if you're given the wrong idea and you believe it to be true, then you will walk that path. You will walk the path of that false reality. And so therefore that is consistent with the notion that the delusion is that Sydney is talking to him from the future, telling him to help Al-Farouk. And so then that led David to then contact Al-Farouk in that middle segment of the episode where he finally meets him, the actual, like, Al-Farouk, who I guess ultimately will be the person that we will see in reality when we find his body, his original form. And then that led us to that really great sequence. I fucking love that sequence. There's so much on the show. Just artistically, film in terms of filmmaking, like there were so many fucking awesome creative moments in just this episode, which is not surprising, right? That's just the nature of the show. The nature of the show is to tell a really interesting story and use the visual design elements, the optical effects, as well as maybe special effects, as well as any other aspect of the filmmaking to enhance the sort of tenuous reality nature of the show that is its signature. There was a lot of that. So at the beginning we had just the first shot. It was like sort of this kaleidoscopic view of a lollipop, and then we wound up on that carousel, and that's when we see David interacting with who we thought was the Shadow King, but ultimately is just apparently this mind, this sentient mind of this girl that he knew in the insane asylum, played by Aubrey Plaza, who apparently has been working for the Shadow King, but is not the actual Shadow King, as we saw later. They're actually two separate entities. So we saw her, and then Oliver, and then they were all sort of talking, and it led to David going along with the plan that the Shadow King had to sort of divert everybody away from the facility so that he can then go to the facility and do what? Like, what was he trying to do there? Like, he wanted to find the monk? Is that what he wanted to do? This monk that apparently somehow knows maybe the location of his body? I don't know. It's unclear, but some interesting stuff happened in that sequence when the Shadow King went to Division 3. Before I get to that, though, like when they were driving like towards the grassy field where that fortune teller stand was, there was discussion about what were called androids, right? The triumvirate is what I'll call them. They were called the Vermilion. That's what they call them. They call them the Vermilion. And how they are androids, and there's maybe more than 3 of them, and they don't have thoughts, just data, because they do have computers in their heads, based on what was told to us before. Now, one thing I did sort of think about since last week was, like, I don't know if all of you remember, but I do. When I was a kid, I used to watch Robotech before I used to go to school. And Robotech was this awesome 3 large chapter story told over 85 episodes, which was actually 3 different animes from Japan that were put together and dubbed in English, and a different story was told uniting the 3. The middle chapter was about these invaders that were called the Robotech Masters, and they were genetic specialists. They would have a clone army that were giants that they controlled, that were the first invaders in the first chapter of the story that took place like 20 years before. And then they were the invaders in the second part, and then we had their enemies, the Invid, be the invaders in the third part, and it was all a really cool story. Anyway, the thing about the Robotech Masters was that they were all about, like, the triumvirate, like the three that think as one. And I remembered afterwards, like, and why this reminded me of it was that the 3 that think as one, they had that sort of androgynous look and feel to them, and they also had the same exact electronic voice. And then, so I thought of that, and then today when they were talking about the characters, like, they called them Vermilion, and, like, in Robotech, like, one of the squadrons was named Vermilion Squadron, and it was, like, one of the main sort of groups of fighters that the show focused on, like, the characters, their lives, their interactions, etc. So, this, in no way does this hold any more meaning than is evident, but it appears to be a clear reference to those characters and those ideas. But also there was a mention in my one of my comments about these Greek mythological, like, 3 entities that controlled fates or something. That might be an element as well. Like, obviously, a lot of it can be an amalgam of a lot of references, and therefore that generates something completely different. But nonetheless, like, there is a clear reference being made to Robotech, if you know Robotech. And what does that mean? It may not mean anything, but it may mean something. I don't know. We'll see. Robotech was about alien invaders. There was a mention of the Shi'ar today. So, does that mean anything? Are we once again seeing seeds being laid for things that will develop later on? Season 3, Season 4, Season 5. Who knows? I don't know. But it's super fucking interesting. I did want to highlight that. Anyway, the sequence where Al-Farouk, as Oliver, is, like, going through Division 3 and snapping motherfuckers out of existence, turning them into dust, turning them into pigs and fish. Dope, right? Super dope. He can transmutate, folks. Does that mean that when he did the same thing, when he was inside of David in Season 1, and David went to rescue his sister, that when he was snapping motherfuckers out of existence then, which was fucking dope, man. Just the effect of him doing it's terrifying, right? It's terrifying that there can be a being so powerful that they can snap their fingers and make your entire mass just crumble. Like, your molecular structure basically, like, disintegrates and you become dirt. That is just an awesome concept, and to see it is amazing. When the Shadow King was inside David, he was doing that. So that wasn't David's power. And so when him and Sid switched bodies in the first episode, and then Audrey Plaza was stuck in that wall that appeared, was that also the Shadow King's powers and not David's powers? Interesting questions. It's still unclear as to what are David's actual powers. It appears to be that this power to have complete control over matter, physical reality, and be able to transmutate matter, that appears to be the Shadow King's power, which is scary and very interesting. And even though that I don't believe is a power that he had in the comics, it is consistent with the idea that Grant Morrison developed, which was the secondary mutation. And so mutants can develop a secondary power. Maybe that's what happened here. And I'm willing to go along with that. I don't know yet. I'm sure eventually it'll all be explained. Or maybe not. But I have a feeling it will be. I have a feeling everything will be explained eventually. Because if it doesn't, then all we'll get is... we'll get Lost. I was going to say Lost. I don't want to talk about Lost, but Lost is one of the great disappointments of my life. As far as like my pop culture fandom. Let's not talk about Lost. Continue talking about Legion. So, anyway, awesome display of power. Interesting situation with Carrie. The Shadow King affected his power so that the girl now is the one that is out, and then the other guy couldn't get in, or like couldn't absorb her, but then he was absorbed. Weird. Interesting though. Anyway, so that whole sequence, I love that whole sequence. Didn't lead to much, but no, actually no, it did lead to something. That's Melanie, who's played by Jean Smart. Is that her name? I forget her name again. She was from Designing Women. And apparently Fargo as well. That's when she found out that he was looking for that monk. Right. And then also during that situation, like that started to cast a shadow of doubt on David's intentions. The Vermilion and the other dude, the burned guy, believed that David potentially was helping the Shadow King, which is clear that he was. Yeah, it's at this point, like, it's all so up in the air, which I love. I don't want to know everything. I want to be completely fucking confused. And I'm not 100% confused, but obviously there's a lot that's uncertain here, and that's fine, you know? That's the nature of the show, and I want it. I want to go on this ride. Anyway, so we had something like that stuff about the delusion, not the delusion, but like that sort of poetic sequence where they talked about the nature of reality, and it was weird. It was named Chapter 4. I think it was named Welt, which is funny. Anyway, then that took us to, the burn guy talking to David, and then after that, David wound up going to David wound up going to the future first, and then all that happened. So it was an interesting sort of situation when he went into the future. And then the discussion about this future threat. Again, none of that may be real. It may all be the Shadow King fucking with David, but maybe not. Based on what Sydney told him, though, that he kills the Shadow King in a week. Does that mean the season's going to take place within a week, maybe, or not? And at the end of it, we'll see the emergence of a new threat. Is that real? I don't know. But it's an exciting potential trajectory for the show that I did not see coming. So fantastic. I love the taken in interesting, uncertain directions. Please do that for me, show. I will go along for that ride. Anyway, so I'll start to wrap it up now. We got towards the end. Oh, no. We had that really fucking great moment where he actually meets Al-Farouk, and they had that fight, and then Al-Farouk turns into a samurai, and then David turns into a tank, and then Al-Farouk turns into like the storm. It was so fucking dope, man. I love that they just are able to throw themselves into the astral plane at any time and do whatever the fuck they want. And every time they do, it is interesting as fuck. It is interesting as fuck to watch. It is interesting to just digest what we're seeing. Everything is fucking interesting about it. Love it. And I love that interaction. Like, I love like the arrogance, the hubris of the Shadow King. It's just fantastic. He believes himself to be a god. It's such a great mindset for such a big threat. To believe themselves to be so much transcended above humans, above normal folks, above normal life. To believe that they are so elevated, that somehow that they are entitled to greatness, that they are entitled to have complete power and dominion over everything. Like, I love it. I love it. And the guy that played it, he like sold it so fucking well. It's like, yeah, man, you are the fucking Shadow King, man. And I believe your intentions, and I am afraid of them, and I want to see what's going to happen. I love that he's like tempting David with that same ideology. Like, you are as great. You shouldn't like diminutize yourself. Like you are as far from humans as they are from mutants, you know, as Apocalypse said in the animated series. Like, they are elevated, and maybe even beyond like your standard mutants. They are gods, as Al-Farouk said, you know. It's such a wonderful megalomaniacal mindset, and it's exactly what I want from my all powerful, maybe unstoppable villain. So thank you for that, show. I'm wondering if it's gonna have like I wonder if like there's going to be a point where like he's able to bring David into that mindset as well, and kind of bring out the dark Phoenix David. I don't know, and maybe the Shi'ar will have to get involved. Then maybe the Phoenix Force will. I don't want. Okay, I'm going a little bit too far here, but there's a mention of a Shi'ar. If there's a mention of a Shi'ar, there's got to be a Phoenix Force, and if there's a Phoenix Force love powerful telepaths, so it would be interesting to see the Phoenix Force come into play in the show, but it's not going to happen. But if it did happen, folks, they would actually do it right. Unlike fucking X-Men The Last Stand, and probably unlike X-Men Phoenix, Dark Phoenix, or whatever the fuck it's called. That's not coming out this year, apparently. Not till next year in February or some shit. Who knows how that's going to turn out. God, I'm crossing my fucking fingers, but I am not in any way optimistic about it. Tangent done. Then we got that scene with David on that rooftop with Sid. Was that fucking real? Because it had a very Salvador Dali, surrealist sort of backdrop to it. You had those giant green hands like floating in the sky, and it wasn't just one. They were everywhere, and they were just kind of dangling there. It looked like a Salvador Dali painting. It was never addressed. Sydney had switched bodies with a cat. That's something we know that she can do. She can switch bodies with entities. So that is a physical reality occurrence. But what was happening in the background didn't feel that way. So what the fuck? Like, what was that? I don't know. We may never know. I love it though. And in that final sequence, like, we had that moment where Sid was like, okay, I'm buying what you're selling, and we should go along with what the Shadow King wants. We should help him. We should find this monk, and we should help him find his body. Given what we saw in the background, this may not be real, and this may be, again, part of David's delusion. That may not have happened at all. The Shadow King could be completely playing with David. And everything that David is doing is completely part of the Shadow King's plan. There is no future alternate threat. You know, like, a lot of what's going on is all either in David's head, or Al-Farouk is creating illusions. Like, he was driven out of David's body, but like, he was inside of David for fucking like, how long? Like 20 years? Like, that is a link that probably still exists. And he probably still has a really solid hold on David's will. If that's the case, that's the case, you know? I don't know. I fucking love this shit, man. I wish I could watch this whole season right now all together. Just sit down and binge it, because it would... I know you guys want that too, but okay, well, we have it, and it's not like one of these stupid shows where it's like, we're going to show you 3 episodes, and then we're going to take a month off, and you're going to have to wait for the next one. Not like that. If one of my commenters, and by the way, I love all of you guys commenting and interacting, talking about the show. I think it's fantastic, and I love talking about this show, and I'm really happy to talk about it with you guys. Anyway, somebody mentioned that maybe the show. Wait, what did he mention again? I forgot. I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. Yeah, I started thinking about the follow. Anyway, what was it? I forgot. Sorry about it, folks. All right. Love the show. Love everything that's happening on the show. Love talking about the show. Some folks are saying, just a couple last comments on the things that people were saying. Some folks were saying that it was intentionally trying to be smart and that it's a terrible show, but a lot of people obviously love it. But clearly there is that contingent of people that sit down to watch and they're just like, all right, this is just trying too hard. And like to all of you that believe that, I have to just really clearly try to sway your opinion just based on the fact that you have to acknowledge that the nature of the show requires that the creators take the approach that they're taking, and maybe they're taking it a slightly further than you would expect, but isn't that their artistic freedom to do that? Don't they have an artistic license to do that, given that they are artists? I mean, if you're a writer, if you're a director, if you're any kind of person involved in filmmaking, like, you are an artist to a good extent, and as an artist, don't you have a right to kind of like free yourself of constraints of what is expected and take your art down paths that maybe you don't even know where they're going to lead, but are unconventional, and especially when you're telling a story that has so many interesting elements like this one does. Like, why not just like dive headfirst into the weirdness, just completely undo what we know to be normal reality and redefine it in a way that helps us once again to kind of always keep us in an unstable position as audience members, not quite knowing what is real and what isn't. That's a fun experience for me. On top of the fact this is an X-Men show, on top of the fact that it's super creative and wonderful, like, I love the fact that I'm constantly in a state of like, I don't know what's fucking actually real or not, and I love that. So give it a chance, folks. Go for a ride. Like, it doesn't have to be what everything else is. Like, things can be different. You know, like everything else that you want this to be is already there. Like, so if we already have the stuff that's already what it is, what is generally done, then why not just kind of let this show take you down a completely different path, create a completely different experience for you, and then ultimately, once it's done, then you can say, okay, well, let me express my overall thoughts about the experience in comparison to what I normally get from a television show. But for now, it's like, instead of like criticizing it for trying to be smart, just let it be smart or whatever it is, and just go for the ride. You know, just go for the ride. But again, everybody has a right to their own opinion. If you hate it, that's your right, and I respect it. I don't hate it. I fucking love it, and I know a lot of people do as well. And I can't wait for more. Give me season 2. Give me season 3. Give me season 20. I'll take fucking season 80 from Legion, because what they're doing is fucking awesome. And I never, again, like I mentioned last week, would have expected it to be so wonderful. And I'm glad it is. Anyway, I will leave it there because I've been talking for 33 minutes and I could talk for 33 more. By the way, I just want to give a quick shout out to my beautiful new Onslaught statue. I haven't gotten a new statue in probably like 2 years. And it's my birthday next week. So I wanted to get this one for myself, and it is just exquisite. I'm in love with it. For those of you that don't know, Onslaught is a character that was developed in the 90s. It is a result of Xavier's sort of guilty conscience. Like, his mind created this creature called Onslaught because of things that Xavier had to do, that ultimately he would like shut behind some doors in his mind. Part of that was like turning off Magneto's mind, and that ultimately is why you see sort of a Magneto quality to the design, because it's sort of a fusion of Magneto and Xavier, and also a kind of metamorphosis of powers to the extent that like the powers were amplified and he was able to warp reality. It's a crazy story, folks. I recommend you going back and reading the whole Onslaught series. It's fucking great. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about Legion. Legion episode 2, fantastic. Can't wait for Legion episode 3. I will be back next week. If you want to keep up with my stuff, don't forget, I got a button down there. It's the subscribe button. Click it. You'll be able to keep up with my latest uploads. There's another button down there. It's either the like or the dislike. Click that too. Express yourself. Tell me whether you hate or love my video. It's all right if you hate me. It's all right. I'm okay with it. I got thick skin. Folks. And also, as always, I want to remind you that if you haven't already, you better put an X in that box, ladies and gentlemen, because ain't nobody checking me. Take care, folks. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.